Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. You know, the Torah says as follows. The Torah in Parshas Chaya Sorah says, Vayu Chaya Sorah. This was the life of Sorah. She was 100 years, she was 20 years, she was 7 years. Sorah lived her life to the fullest. And then Sorah, her life comes to an end, and she dies in a city called Hebron. Kiryas Arba hi Hebron. And Avram comes to bury Sarah. He comes to eulogize for her, and he comes to cry for her. He came to celebrate her life, and he wanted to bury her. And the people of the city wanted to give him the land, the burial place, as a gift. And Avram Avinu said, absolutely not. I am buying it. And he paid the greatest currency. He bought the land to bury Sarah. Since then, Hebron has been in the possession of the Jewish people. God gave it to us. We inherited it, and Avram Avinu bought it. And yet Hebron is always in the news. Hebron is one of the most challenging cities. It's one of the 4 holy cities in Israel. But at the same time, it's challenging. And as we say, Hashem watches Israel. Israel has miracles. But nonetheless, Hebron, always in the news, always a bit contentious to the outside world, not to the Jewish people, but it's one of these special cities. God directs the steps of man. One of the most accomplished emissaries of the Rebbe, Rabbi Danny Cohen and his Rebbetzin, find themselves in Hebron. The stories that you hear about Rabbi and Rebbetzin Cohen's work is unbelievable. American-born Rabbi Cohen, who's there, he's going to tell us all about Hebron, the challenges, what we can learn for it, what we can learn from it. So I'm looking so forward to this journey. And Rabbi Cohen, we've been trying to pin you down for quite a few weeks now. You've been in America, you've been there, you've been in lockdown. Well, it's lovely to have you, and we're looking very forward to this amazing journey with you this evening. And thank you for making the time.
Beautiful. L'chaim. Yes, I'm still in lockdown actually, but being in lockdown in the city of Hebron is something special. And really, I would say that everything that has to do with our personal life, with our our public work is always something special, because when you're operating and when you're even going to the store, taking your kids to school, welcoming people, whatever it is, and you're doing so in the vicinity, walking on the same streets, the same land that has the most, people aren't aware, but Hebron, where we live, has the most continuous Jewish history of Jewish presence in more than any other place in the world, even more than Yerushalayim. From the days of King David, that his first 7 years of being king of Israel was here in Hebron, till 1929. According to the historians, there was always a Jewish presence in Hebron. Even while there was exiles, people were driven from the land all over. But here, there was always a Jewish presence. Sometimes that presence meant 2-3 families, 10 people. There was, I tell this to many visitors, tourists, that under normal circumstances, when it's not, when we're not in a COVID situation, then a very major part of our work is welcoming groups that come to Hebron, and to make sure that they have a spiritual experience and a connecting experience, because you could come here and like Rabbi Messinter mentioned, this is a place that's constantly on the news. It's a place that's high profiled as a controversial, quote unquote, area, smack in the middle of the Middle East conflict. And you could come here, and all that you would experience is the political situation, the security situation. Our job, and really that's the job of any shaliach, any emissary, anybody that's connected to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is to give a fellow Jew the right glasses, to put on the glasses to be able to see better, to see the depth, to see the inside. And our mission is to make sure that anybody that we have contact in to see what Hebron is really about. And so walking here, and people ask us, me and my wife Batsheva, we're celebrating in another. Actually, next week is going to be our 20th anniversary. 20 years ago, we came to Hebron. It was Yudchet Elul, the 18th of Elul, Chai Elul, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Alter Rebbe. And this was 20 years ago. We came to Hebron, and next week we're going to celebrate this anniversary. And over the years, one day I'm going to sit down and write a book, many, many, many special stories and encounters. But we developed, both me and my wife, we like to, when we meet someone, especially if he's from Johannesburg or from South Africa, and they ask you, hey, where are you from? We like to say in a very casual way, Hebron, like Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, Hebron. And there's always a reaction. People hear the word Hebron. Usually, if you're coming from the right side, if the right wing, the more traditional, conservative, it's a pat on the back. Hey, guys, continue the fight, as if we're ducking bullets here all day. If it's we're meeting somebody that's coming from more from the left, more from the, let's say, less traditional observant, it's a smirk, a lift of an eyebrow. It's a these are the crazies that we hear about from the news. And we really yearn for the day that when I introduce myself and somebody asks where are you from, and I say Shalom Aleichem, I'm from Hebron, that people wouldn't think about conflict. People wouldn't think about terror, about the whole Middle Eastern situation. But people would the same way. If I would, I live here in a very special address, 770 Avram Avinu. We live in the Avram Avinu neighborhood. And if you don't believe me, maybe I'll take out my wallet. I'll show you my car license. You could see that's the official address. But if I would get into a travel time, a car that would bring me back into the past, and I would land 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in any place where there was a Jewish population, whether it be in Kiev or Moscow or Casablanca or Baghdad. And I would land and I would walk in the street and I would meet a fellow Jew and I would say, Shalom Aleichem, and he would say, Aleichem Shalom, where are you from? And I would say the word Hebron. What would people think about? What would be the association? People would think about our fathers and mothers, King David, the Reshish Chochmah, the Chemed, the Chesed LaAvram. These are names of Jewish giants, people that wrote special books that are part of any Jewish library today. People would think about holiness, about the source of prayer. It says in the Kabbalah and the Zohar that all of our prayers, coming from Johannesburg, coming from Cape Town, coming from Jerusalem even, coming from New York, they all make a U-turn at one point, and they come through Hebron. That the advocates, our lawyers, the ones that present our prayers to God, are our fathers and mothers. So obviously, if I would meet somebody 100 years ago, and I'd say I'm from Hebron, their eyes would light up, and they would think about what it's all about, the holiness, the spirituality. Unfortunately, today, and really that's probably that's been the case already for almost 40 years. When I introduce myself, or my wife, when I say we're from Hebron, people think about conflict, terror, demonstrations, Arabs. I mean, for me, it was kind of funny. I was in Johannesburg, I think, 16 years ago, And I remember for me it was quite shocking, just to see the whole situation with the fences and the barbed wire and the whole the security system that you guys have over there. And when people are asking me, "Wow, you're from Hebron, is that safe?" And I'm looking at it, please, you know, I think we're in a safer situation. But we can argue about that later. But basically, our mission is that anybody that we come into contact with, soldiers, tourists, is that they should walk away with a connecting experience, not just learning about the political situation of 2020, but feeling. Somebody once told me that when you drink wine, a good wine, if you drink the wine on inside the winery or the vineyard where this wine was produced, the wine tastes much better. When you're connecting to anything that has to do with our shared Torah, shared values of the Jewish people, when you do so in the vicinity, in the vineyard of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah, it has a much greater meaning. We read this Shabbos, the Parsha is Ki Tavo, speaks about our coming to the land, how we would bring to the Holy Temple, to the Kohanim, to the priests, the Bikurim, which is the first produce of the land, the fruit. We would bring the finest of the crop to Yerushalayim. And the Rebbe speaks about, in many cases, dealing with this parsha, about how this is a teaching for us that every person should take the best of his crop, the best of his time, the best of his energy, and that should be presented to God. That should be set aside to offer our thanks to Hashem through giving Him the best of our time. So we really have the privilege, and I think that even though some people that come and visit here, we've had that remark quite a few times, that people come here and they think that the guys that knew how to play their cards, the guys that got the best grades in yeshiva, in Chabad, they were sent to the places, like California, Hawaii, the Far East, beautiful exotic places. And we were kind of, maybe we did something wrong, that we were punished and we were sent to a place like Hebron. So the truth is that, obviously this is not a punishment for us. This is a great reward. I'm sure that at least some of the people that are tuning in and listening to this broadcast tonight are, visited here. And you're definitely, anybody that visits here or is knowledgeable about what's going on in Hebron, there's definitely many challenges that have to do with living in a city that were basically 70 Jewish families in the biblical area of Hebron. 5 minutes away is Kiryat Arba. There's another 8,000 Jews, but, surrounded by 200,000, give or take, Arabs that, without getting down to many things, definitely are not happy about our presence here. And so there's definitely a set of challenges that my colleagues, my Chabad friends, rabbis around the world don't experience. But on the other hand, the list of benefits that comes with or came with this position that we started, like I mentioned, 20 years ago, is much greater than any other challenge. First of all, living in a community, we may be small at numbers, and let you not be mistaken. The reason that there's only 70 Jewish families living here and not 70,000 is not because there's not enough Meshuganos that want to come and live in this holy city. In fact, there's a long waiting list, believe it or not, to come and live here. But again, without getting into a whole long political discussion, really from the Six-Day War, you read in the news about how Israel is forced to freeze building in what the world calls settlements. We obviously refer to these areas as the heartland of Israel. If you open up the Bible and, even if you go through carefully all the hundreds and hundreds of pages, you're not going to find the address Ben Yehuda Street or Dizengoff Center or Allenby or Petach Tikva or Netanya. Obviously, this is all part of our Holy Land and precious cities. But when you flip through the Bible, especially the first part, the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, the first book, every few pages you'll stumble upon a city that today is considered by the world as a controversial, as occupied, and all kinds of funny nicknames. We know that we're living in the heartland of the Holy Land. I grew up in a place called Psagot. Today it's known for being a fancy winery. When I was growing up, it was known for growing up and driving every day through Intifada land. The first, the Arab uprisal, and going to school every day was, going through getting rocks hurled at. There were Molotov cocktails and all kinds of. You could say that Hebron comes as a natural dwelling place for me. My wife grew up in the Golan Heights. If I'm already getting off the track, to describe my wife, comes from Ramat Magshimim. And we have 5 boys and a girl living here in Hebron. So where I grew up, it was the place when you read the book of Joshua, and it speaks about how the people of Israel, the second city that they conquered when they entered the land was a place called the Ai. And this was right there in our backyard. So it's very interesting that the places that are really our only claim to the land. Our claim to the land is because this is where we have been for thousands of years, and this is what Hashem gave it to us. So the cities and the locations that are, you would say, the heart of the heartland, but also at the same time, a very an essential place of the whole conflict is in Judea and Samaria. And we're in Hebron, the capital of Judea, and really till this day, from back then, but definitely from the Six-Day War till this day, probably from the whole Israel, that so many around the world contest our right to even live here, be here. Hebron is really the place that's the most, it's a few square mile of Jewish presence. Like I mentioned, only 70 Jewish families. 97% of the city of Hebron is off limits for Jews to walk around, to be present. Only 3% of the city is what's considered the Jewish area, and yet, if you Google the Jewish presence in Hebron, it looks as if we're expelling all of our Arab neighbors and taking over their homes, and basically that they have only 3%. So the truth is the contrary. So I just want to go back. I mentioned about how this parsha is about bringing the best part of the offering, and we really have the privilege amongst, like I said, living in a place that's so meaningful, past, present, and future to Jewish history. We have the greatest privilege that our community, the community that we serve as Chabad Shluchim, emissaries, is the Jews that are the worthy of the most appreciation of any Jew in the world. Our community all wears green. And, as you could guess, our clients, quote unquote, are the Israeli soldiers, the thousands of troops that are stationed in this area. A large part of them are actually literally a few-minute walk from our home. We live, as I mentioned, in the Avram Avinu neighborhood, which is a piece of land, a neighborhood that has documented history that goes back over 1,000 years of Jews living here. But 2-3 minute walk from our house is a army base, and there's quite a few in this area. And then if I would drive 5 to 10 minutes to places that are part of our, our turf, our territory that we cover, we're talking about that in an average year, we have the responsibility, and like I said, the privilege to come in contact with literally thousands, probably over 10,000 a year of Israeli troops, brave men and women that could have chosen, any soldier that serves here is in a combat position. When I was in the army back in 1992 to 95, there was many cases and situations where soldiers, even though they would rather not be in an infantry unit, in a combat unit, because they had the right health criteria, they were forced to. They had to be part of a combat unit. And today, the situation is much different. Any soldier that is serving here is because he chose to do so. And choosing to be a combat soldier and being stationed in places like Hebron, like Gaza, combat units like the Golani, Givati, sure you heard the names, the paratroopers. My oldest son is now a officer in the paratrooper brigade. At one point, in another few months, they're going to be visiting Hebron as well. Anybody that is serving in these areas, he did so out of choice. And what's amazing is to encounter these beautiful souls, these brave, really modern-day Maccabees. And you get into a conversation, and you speak to them. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's our void that we have to fill. Many of them lack a basic Jewish knowledge. That any kid that would go to King David and school in Johannesburg, or any Jewish learning education experience around the world, might have more of a knowledge than them. You get into a conversation and you realize that not everybody is aware about Hebron, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. What does it really mean to us? Where is it mentioned? And yet these guys, boys, girls, are willing to give their lives over for the country, for the people. So obviously we are humbled, even though, these are young kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, but to have the opportunity to show them appreciation on behalf of the Jewish community, the global community, making sure that they understand that the fact that they're standing in and protecting the city of our fathers and mothers, that if we don't have the right and we don't have the option to claim this land, to be in this place called Hebron, with all the challenges, then we don't have a right to be anywhere else. I mean, this is where the first real estate transaction in the history of mankind that's recorded took place right here in Hebron. These soldiers make sure that any Jew could come and visit them. So for us to be able to show them appreciation, whether it's visiting at their posts, we have on I'll just share with you a little bit of what we do here. We have on a rotation of every 8 to 10 months. There's around 10 yeshiva boys, Chabad Bochurim, that come here and join us. And besides learning for a few hours in the cave of Machpelah, their job is to go and to reach out and to walk between the army posts and the army patrols and coming with coffee and cake, and especially when it's done at night. There's always 2-3 boys that their shift is between 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. and just going around to the Chayalim and bringing them a smile, warmth, goodies, and again, showing them how much we appreciate what we're doing and engaging in conversation is, one of the tools used to make sure that when the soldiers leave here, they're going to leave not only with a military experience and that they get plenty of. We actually pray that they should have a boring tour here, but they're looking for the action. We're hoping that they have a boring time. But in any event, it's a very, very challenging and tough position to be as a soldier. Hebron.
And can I just ask you?
Yes, please.
Okay, amazing to hear. Just go back. Abraham buys this to bury Sarah, right?
Yes.
And since then, it is Jewish land. In 1929, you mentioned something happened there. How many Jews lived in Hebron in the year 1929? And what happened in 1929?
All right. So 1929, whenever I get engaged in a conversation or a debate with people that want to claim that, if you guys would leave Judea and Samaria, if you would leave the occupied territories, then all the problems in the Middle East will be solved and peace will come upon the land. That's really the main issue of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I always answer, if that's the case, if that's what's bothering our neighbors, is the post-67 situation where Israel miraculously won the Six-Day War, then what exactly upset the Arabs of Hebron in the mid-August of 1929, when you asked how many people? There was a Jewish community here of 1,500 people, and we're talking about a time. There's no Israeli flag, there's no Israeli soldiers, there's no settlers. There's Jews that are living continuously, like I mentioned in the beginning, for hundreds of years, living like in any shtetl in Europe, learning, working, without having any aggression or any things that the world would like to blame on us today. And yet, in one Shabbos, in one weekend, that started on Friday, the most horrific weekend in the history of the Jews of Hebron, there was a pogrom, a riot, that actually was initiated. It's amazing how many times over the past century, past 100 years, this excuse was used. But in 1929, there was a Jewish gathering at the Western Wall, a certain protest against the British mandate to allow Jewish prayer on a regular basis at the site. The Muslim leaders on the Temple Mount used this to incite the Arabs of Jerusalem, and with Middle Eastern exaggeration and imagination, these, the news came to all over the country that the Jews are taking over the Temple Mount and taking down the mosque, and so on and so forth. We heard this many times in the past 50 years. And in one weekend, a Jewish community that existed here from the times of King David was destroyed. 69 Jews were murdered. Hundreds were wounded. The survivors were sent away. And by the way, this was at a time of the British mandate. There was British policemen a kilometer away from the scenes of the pogrom. And they did not attempt to stop it. only after 24 hours after this community was really destroyed and the survivors were sent away to Jerusalem, most of them probably thinking that they would never come back. But, Baruch Hashem, me and my family are living in a house, the same house that hosts on a average basis every Shabbat. We have here around 60 soldiers that join us for Shabbat. I'm the only one that's allowed to drink to make a l'chaim because these guys are on duty. But in this same house was a Talmud Torah before during the time of 1929 of the pogrom.
So then come back. So 29 that happens, the remnant of the community is sent to Yerushalayim. 1967 comes, and miraculously Israel regains, takes back Hebron. How big was the community then? And often at time, the name Nachshon comes up, an artist who lived in Hebron.
Yes.
Why don't you just tell us what happened after 67?
All right, so that rightfully so, the names come up. So actually, you would think that such a place like Hebron would be conquered after a great battle and a lot of blood that spilled. But the truth is that this was on the third day of the 6-day war. Hebron was liberated without one shot being fired. The Arabs of Hebron heard that the IDF is on their way. They heard about the success of the Israeli army in Jerusalem, and they were sure that the Jews are coming back to take revenge. Talking about only 40 years, less than 40 years after this pogrom, that almost every local Arab at the time, there were a few righteous ones, like that the Holocaust, that there was righteous people that saved Jews from the massacre, but we're talking about either the same people or their parents that took part in this pogrom. They were sure that the Israelis are going to come and behave the same way that they did. And when the army rolled into Hebron, there was white flags all over of surrender. And that in itself is a story that's worthy to tell, but it's a long story. And at the time, obviously 1967, there was no Jews living here, but comes this is 67, so for 10 years, for over 10 years actually, up until the late 70s, 1980, for many years there was a group of stubborn Jews that wanted to make sure that, if there's one place that's, like we said, rightfully ours, that we should be allowed to return here.
Rabbi
Believe
Cohen,
it or not,
Rabbi Cohen, I think you're blocking your phone. Rabbi Cohen, your sound is not perfect.
Israeli authorities,
Rabbi Cohen.
with the Israeli authorities to allow a Jewish presence here, a Jewish permanent presence here. Only after almost a decade of
Rabbi Cohen, I think Rabbi Cohen, you're muffling your sound.
War Baruch and Sarah Nachshon. Baruch Nachshon is a renowned Hasidic artist. Many hundreds or thousands of people of Jews have his art hanging on or replicas of. Was actually an individual.
Rabbi Cohen.
Rebbe paid for his art studies, and he and his wife received the blessing to be part of the pioneering group to return to Hebron. This was already in the 70s. The government did not allow Jews to live in Hebron proper. They built Kiryat Arba, which is
Rabbi Cohen.
Rabbi Cohen of the rights. They have a lot of rights and
Put your hand on
privileges
your
for
microphone.
us being able to be here.
You're putting your hand on your microphone.
But I can't hear you.
And you're muffling the sound. Okay, continue.
No, I can't.
Perfect. Now you can continue. You were blocking your microphone.
All right, no, but what? There's something wrong. Wait, let me just join you again.
Yeah, let's give Rabbi Cohen a second. He's coming back. Most interesting how this man lives.
Okay, yes, now I'm back. How much more time do I have? I should just
Have like this. You have another 10 minutes.
Okay. So what should we focus on?
I would like you to focus in. So now, since 67, there was a small community. You were telling us about the people who weren't allowed to live there. Come back to that. When did Jews start to live there?
So this is in 1980, 1981 was when the first time that the Israeli government allowed Jews to live in Hebron proper and the same properties and buildings and locations where Jews lived, like hundreds and thousands of years. Everything really, and anybody that visits Hebron, you could notice it, that every place, every location, on one side, there's not one family that lives here in an area that's not that is not deeded, that there's a deed to, that's owned by Jews from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and beyond. But on the other side, every place where Jewish people live today in Hebron, it was after permission to live there was after a tremendous struggle, whether it be with the authorities, with the enemies surrounding us. It was after terror attacks and so on and so forth. There's many Jewish properties today. People don't realize this, but there's many properties, and a lot of them are owned by the Chabad movement. Not only by Chabad movement, just down the road, there's like I mentioned, an army base. That army base is sitting on top of the piece of land is deeded. The original deed is in Arabic. It was put under the Turkish government, and it's written in Arabic. Schneerson. It's Mamish. It was bought by, excuse me, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. So there's many Jewish properties today that we don't even have access to. That's in the Arab area, and out of security reasons, political reasons, whatever it is, we don't have access to. But over the years, there was a permission given to live and to dwell in specific in certain places. And today there's 70 families living here. Hopefully, finally, after many years, a year ago, there was declared, that they're going to allow another Jewish neighborhood to be built on top of actually a Chabad property, where another 35 families are going to be, have housing units. Let's say in a place like Hebron, we don't take out the champagne bottles to make a l'chaim until you actually see the tractors on, working. But, hopefully this will be very big news for the community.
You say there's a list of people wanting to move to, is that hundreds, is it thousands, is it?
There's a list of over 100 people, just because people are aware that there's no, but I guarantee if there would be tomorrow morning an announcement that, 1,000 Arabs decided to sell their homes in the vicinity of Me'arat HaMachpelah, there would be within a few weeks there would be taken. There's definitely
Are
definitely in the
Jews,
past.
are Jews allowed to enter? Maras Machpelah is where Adam and Eve are resting, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rivka, and Jacob and Leah. Are Jews allowed to
Right.
enter into that holy place?
So we're allowed into 32 or 33% of the site. The rest of the site is the Muslim side. Again, believe it or not, you read about in the paper about the Trump deal and the annexation, yes or no. Basically, you should be aware that from the Six-Day War till today, the cave of Machpelah, the second holiest site for the Jewish people in the world, is still under Israeli law considered a mosque and not a Jewish site. And that is because the Israeli law was never declared from the Six-Day War till this day in Hebron or the whole Judea and Samaria. So we only have access to a third of the site. Any development there, again, if you're knowledgeable what's the news, you hear news coming out of Israel every few weeks about the discussion about allowing a elevator, a special elevator that would allow people on wheelchairs, handicapped, to be able to come up to Me'arat HaMachpelah. And this is such an issue because anything that has to do with the site is very, very sensitive, is obviously the Muslims. And unfortunately, BDS and anti-Israel organizations will petition the court about any change, whether it be a handicapped elevator or a coat of paint. Everything is contested. Issues like clearing the garbage from the site is also a fight, is also a sign of sovereignty. So we're allowed inside the site, but in a very limited way. And 10 days a year, the Jews have access to the whole cave of Machpelah, which includes the largest hall, the most significant hall, the Isaac and Rebecca hall. That from there's actually the potential access to the lower parts of this edifice where the actual graves are. Around the year, this is a mosque, and 10 days a year, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or on the Shabbat of Chaya Sarah that you mentioned in the beginning, that this is a weekend when 25 to 40,000 Jews come here every single year. I don't know what's going to be this year, but people flock here to be able to read, to hear the reading of the Torah, to relive when we all read and connect to how Avram, our father Abraham, bought this piece of land. So on those special days, we have access to the whole site, and vice versa. On 10 days of Muslim holidays, they have access to the whole site, and we stay outside on those days. So
we're running out of time. We're running out of time. We could listen to you for hours. One more question. The peace treaty between the UAE and Israel, has that brought some calm and relaxation and some hope?
Hope amongst the Israeli citizens here, but unfortunately, there's many Arabs, or it's called Palestinians, that live here in this area that are not people that dream all day long about attacking Jews. But unfortunately, the atmosphere in the street is a very hostile one, is a very, when there were, in the Palestinian Authority, when they held the last elections, this was, I think, over 15 years more, 20 years ago, the Hamas won a landslide victory in Hebron. And their official position on the this peace deal is obviously a negative one, because they weren't they weren't called to the party. That Israel managed to do this without them. So I wouldn't say that it brought calm to the general public, but I would say that there's more and more locals that understand that for their best interest is to find a way to live together rather than attack or something.
Okay, I want you to end off, Rabbi Cohen, with one. We're standing just 20 days before Rosh Hashanah, and we would like a thought from you, living in one of the most challenging cities in the world. We'd like a little thought from you to everybody who's participating here, a New Year thought.
Okay, so we know that it's explained all over the Jewish library, especially in the more inner dimensions, the Kabbalah, the Chassidut, how the way Hashem created this world till the coming of Mashiach, wherever there is holiness, there's going to be a challenge on that. Whenever a Jew tries to pray, tries to focus in his prayers, how does one know that he's on the right track? When he has the distractions, when the other side is trying to pull him away from that holiness. And you definitely see that in the land of Israel. It says in the Talmud and the Medrash how there's 3 places in the land of Israel that the nations of the world cannot contest, that it belongs to us, and this is the Temple Mount, the Cave of Machpelah, and the tomb of Joseph in Shechem. Now, if you ask any Israeli or any expert, anybody that's knowledgeable about the Arab-Israeli conflict, that in the past, let's say since the 6-Day War, what is the 3 most controversial and contested places in the land of Israel? That's the Temple Mount, the Cave of Machpelah, and the tomb of Joseph. That wherever there is a extreme holiness, there's going to be opposition. That has to do with one's spiritual growth and own personal spiritual wars, and it has to do with our battles and challenges as a nation. But what keeps us together, Hebron, the Rebbe says, you would think the opposite. This is a place of conflict, a place of controversy, but the word Hebron comes from chibur in Hebrew, which means connection, comes from the word chaver, a friend. And we could talk all day long about how every Jew is a brother and sister to his fellow Jew, and how we're all connected. But at the end of the day, Jews from around the world, even in the same community, we have issues getting along together. But we're definitely very, very different, right? We observe different, we have different customs, so on and so forth. What is really the one thing that makes us, that we're all the same, that we're all share, is that we all share the same parents, our fathers and our mothers. So I just want to bless you with a Shana Tova. We're going to be hearing the shofar. We hear it every day, and we're going to be blasting the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, the whole reason behind the shofar is to awaken the memory by God, by Hashem, of the sacrifice of Isaac, and how the ram was offered to replace Isaac. And this is all from Yitzchak, our father Yitzchak, right here in Me'arat HaMachpelah. So it all comes down, connects to Hebron. So I just want to wish you for Shana Tova, K'tiva v'Chatima Tova. And being that I'm a Kohen, I'm going to just finish off with a priestly blessing from downtown Hebron. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל אהרון ואל בניו לאמור, כה תברכו את בני ישראל, אמור להם, יברך אדוני וישמרך.
אמן.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה.
אמן.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. שמו את שמי על בני ישראל, אני אברכם. Happy New Year, a great New Year, and a year that we will all greet you here together with Mashiach.
We want to respond to you. Thank you for making the time. May you and your family have a ksiva v'chsima tova, the Shana Tovim Sukkah. We should have the ultimate bracha of all. We should celebrate Yud Aleph Elul with the Izgalas Mashiach taken from Miyad in Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh. Guys, thank you for joining. Over to you, Aaron.
Kol tov.
Ashreichem, Marabakive, Ashreichem, Yisrael, Ashreichem, Libenayim, Niyatem, Metarim, Matem, Metarim, Metahayos, Libenayim, Niyatem, Metarim, Matem, Metarim, Metahayosem. Marabakive, Ashreichem, Yisrael, Ashreichem, Marabakive, Ashreichem, Yisrael, Ashreichem. Mit Tare, mit Tare,